This episode of the Peach Life podcast, we are joined by Justin from Gilligan Phantom Presents Mobile Dwellings. Follow along as we talk about their bus build, life on the road, and a lot of the cool tips and tricks they've learned along the way. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Welcome.
Dude, I have so many questions. I love your guys' channel. You guys have a lot of amazing things on your channel, and I have so many questions I want to get started with. What sparked the idea for you guys, building out a Skoolie, getting out on the road and deciding to kind of, change your whole life around?
I think the answer might sort of surprise you. It was kind of um, almost unplanned steps towards the final goal that sort of evolved out of the original idea. And so 2017, we were running an Airbnb out of our converted garage in our house, sort of as a way to make a little bit extra money. And then we had our daughter Nova, and we realized, we couldn't make that extra money anymore in our house because it's just not reasonable to, have people in your house with a newborn. We thought maybe a year or two out, we could transition that into like a backyard Airstream, and we could just keep making a little bit of money. It's important to us to have some more income, and once we got that Airbnb money, we wanted to kind of keep going. But so my wife was into Airstreams. I had seen Skoolies, on Pinterest or something. I'm sure it's the same Skoolies that everybody's seen back in the day, that they're inspired by. And I was like, let's do a bus. Like that's a really exciting idea. And a gutted Airstream is more expensive than a bus from the bus yard.
Yeah, and not really space as well.
Yeah, bigger space, just a much more interesting platform. So that's kind of how this started. Now, that's what we thought a school bus tiny house was, and the more we kind of went down the rabbit hole, we realized that there were people actually living really exciting lives full time on the road in school buses, and in all other types of rigs. And my wife Valerie, she was like, we can do the bus over the Airstream, but there's always bargaining going on in couple life. So she said, I just want to go to around the country and do all the parks for a year. And in my mind, I was like, wow, I have no idea how to make that happen. But the more we started to move into our life as a family with a child, the more that seemed very interesting to me. It seemed much more interesting to me than having a backyard Airbnb. And so the idea very much evolved into it becoming our full-time family home. And, I said, if I can figure out how to get on the road, create a sustainable or a self-sustaining lifestyle, we can do it. And, nobody's going to probably execute that perfectly, but I felt like I had done enough of a job to make it happen. And so that's how the idea started. It was not even anything like it looks like today.
Wow, that's really cool to see how kind of ideas do evolve and morph, and you do see that for a lot of people. A lot of people probably decide to maybe initially go into tiny living as maybe that, like a backyard dwelling, or a granny flat, something that can just maybe do something to ease the financial burden. And then I imagine a lot of people see like, hey, wow, we can actually get out on the road, we can actually go travel. And one thing I think that's cool that 2020 has at least taught me is that this year has kind of been the year of people learning to work from home or from, mobile work. And I think that might be one really interesting change out of it going forward to the future, that there's going to be a lot more availability for people to work remotely, which significantly opens up the amount of people that could potentially live in mobile dwellings and kind of alternative living solutions. So I really like that.
That's what's so exciting to me about the term alternative dwellings or mobile dwellings. There's so many potentially better or interesting ways to live just for the individual, not for the whole of society, than we kind of espouse on TV or just in normal culture. And the fact that you could move your grandparents into your backyard in like a beautiful $40,000 structure is just, that's an incredible idea. You know,
Yeah.
the fact that you could make a community of people like that somewhere, and everybody could, sort of own a piece of land and have a nice space for, not the median home price in America, or especially in expensive markets is. And then of course, you can even live on the road, just jumping around from campsite to campsite. There's just so many things you can do if you sort of like let go of the normal conventions of housing.
Yeah, yeah. Once you realize that, and one thing I noticed is with so many people, they realize once they're in that tiny space that they could even go tinier. It's almost incredible for so many people to see. And I know you've even talked about that. Is like when you start out, it's so easy to, especially transitioning. Going from house to even a bus, even a big one. It's still, you are losing so much of the room that you potentially do have. And so, but seeing once people are living in that situation, and to see how many people, even like yourself and like many others I've talked to, that say like, oh, we could go smaller, we could find better and creative ways to save space, or you will technically lose space, and and still make up for it. So how has that transition been for you guys?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about that, I was realizing that it's all about perspective. And somebody in a 4,500 square foot house might look at our 1,200 square foot house and think that's really small. But we weren't even using all of that space. And the transition into living in the bus, which is, it's about 280 square feet, I think, was actually pretty remarkably easy for us. Um, there's just a few adjustments. Passing somebody in the hallway is like a
Yeah.
new
Oh, yeah.
thing, but it's not hard to do. Sleeping in a little cozy room makes me sleep way better. So that was nice. Um, I wouldn't say it's so much that there was even any trouble at all adjusting to the small space, but adjusting to things that you wouldn't think about takes a little bit of time. So, like for example, in our bedroom, our heads are very close to our windows, which means that like your first thunderstorm is like, it feels like you're outside.
Oh,
And
wow.
you're just a lot closer to the elements, at least in our setup. Even just having a wall that's only 3 inches thick, as opposed to like it would be in a house. So there are adjustments. I would say that, and we started out living in our bus in our yard, so we were still on our property.
Mm.
And sort of we took successive steps to moving in, and it was really not incredibly challenging at all. And the only challenges were things that you wouldn't expect, and they didn't have anything to do with space. It was more like, you know, your head's right at a window, and the moon might, wake you up if you don't have blackout curtains, things like that.
Yeah, what about the as you were talking about kind of the internal transition, it is one thing that might have been a little easier for you guys, but as well as for when you get out on the road, and if you're not used to, if you're not a big rig driver or used to doing that, maybe there's a lot of external things that maybe take some getting used to, trap, especially as you start traveling, in the rig.
Yeah, traveling full time in the bus. We started out, I think we got from Charleston, South Carolina to Denver in something like 8 days. So that was a very fast pace. I had no idea how much work I was going to have to do, just to be a full time bus dad. Between, making sure the engine's running well, we have water, power, we're dumping. And because I self built everything, and I did cut some corners to get in there quicker, there was a lot of adjustments that need to be made to, mostly really our water storage.
Mhm.
But everything, everything added up to a lot of work. If you drive 8 hours a day in a car, that's a challenge. But in a bus, it's like that's all you can do.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of work to go really fast. Um, there was a lot of adjusting to that, and I would say that at that pace, at the pace that we started at, I was pretty unhappy,
Okay.
just with doing that much.
Yeah.
But the goal was, we wanted to get to the Pacific Northwest for the bulk of the summer, and yet we wanted to see Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona. Um, so we did cut some of that off, but that is eventually what we did. And so going in that pace was sort of the only thing we could do to have the trip that we wanted. But yeah, adjusting to full time bus driving, life on the road, and even for Val as a passenger slash caretaker and Nova as a passenger, uh, it's definitely hard couple weeks for anybody, I think.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have any breakdowns, even if you don't have any problems, it's going to be hard.
So for people out there listening that maybe maybe are close or just about to get on the road, that may be one little piece of advice is make sure that you're the pace that you go on is that you're keeping an eye on it, and sometimes slower is a little, I imagine, a little bit better, a little less stress on a lot of areas, less big gaps in between traveling days, keeping maybe some of the distances to a little more manageable amounts.
Yeah, absolutely. And but if you do find yourself in a position where you had to do what we had to do, which I think it'll happen to a lot of people at some point, um, if you hate it, just realize that it's not the only way to do it, and make adjustments. And if you have other challenges that you're seeing that are sort of perplexing you, just make adjustments. You have to make it fit for you and for your lifestyle. And don't be too afraid, because if in the first 2 weeks or the first month you're like, this is challenging, and I don't like it, it's not always going to be like that.
Well, now that you guys have been on the road now for, what has it been, a little over about half a year? Um,
Yep.
are you guys finding that you're doing more boondocking than camping, or are you guys utilizing a kind of a mixture of campsites and boondocking?
Yeah. So um, picking spots is super duper my wife's wheelhouse. I sort of just drive us there, and her approach to getting cross country was mostly harvest hosts,
Okay.
and that actually was a great way to get cross country, because when you spend all day driving, you don't really have time to check out much. But and rest areas off highways are totally fine, and truck stops, in my opinion, are fine. These are fine places to spend a night at. But if you go 5-10 miles off your route to a harvest host, you get to have a unique experience that you wouldn't have on the side of the highway. So we very much did harvest hosts, to get cross country. After that, it was challenging for us to book campgrounds because your plans are so fluid,
Yeah.
in the bus, and almost the more you book and the more you, um, get yourself stuck to those plans, the less you might potentially miss out on other opportunities.
Okay.
And so, obviously, if you want to visit Yellowstone, you have to book that in advance. You have to get there. Same for Zion. But there are actually last minute cancellations that can happen. And there are ways for you to kind of make those places work if you don't want to book campgrounds. But to answer your question, we booked some campgrounds and we made it. And we kept going with the harvest hosts and the campgrounds and a little bit of boondocking in cities when we needed to visit friends in cities. But once we hit the West Coast, we realized that, um, there were sort of some impromptu parking spots that might be a lot more fun than campgrounds. And so we allowed ourselves to sort of let ourselves find, weird spots if necessary, which you then have to strike a balance with that, because um, you might end up not knowing we're going to spend the night, which starts creating some anxiety. You might have a couple of spots that you're going to hit, and there's a point where that might become stressful. So campgrounds, booking them, paying for them if you can, sort of intermittently is a great idea because sometimes you want to have that absolute sense of safety, that ability to not move for 3 days, no, not have to move at all. Um, until you get to the big boondocking spots, which is obviously Arizona, New Mexico, basically the whole desert. Then you can definitely forget about campgrounds. There's no point.
Yeah, well,
Um,
those states have a lot of BLM land that's really available, and there's some good tools and resources out there that help people find those. Do you use any of those? I know there's Campendium, and I think was it freecampsites.net. There's a few different resources out there that people use to find spots. Do you guys use anything like that?
yeah, I would say that my personal flow for finding a campsite is go on iOverlander,
Okay.
which is
Yeah.
an app on a phone. They also have a website. Um, iOverlander is good because iOverlander is kind of for people who are, it's mostly for people who are trying to find places to stay a night or two for free, which means that they're not necessarily your normal camper, and you're going to get sort of like you're going to get some more creativity, and you're going to get some,
Okay.
you know, you're going to get more than you can get from Campendium, which just does campsites. Now, if you want to get campsite reviews and you want to book a campsite, I go to Campendium first, and
Okay.
now all the spots for the most part that are on Campendium are on iOverlander, and surprisingly, neither of those sites have all campgrounds and RV parks. But generally, we found that things that were called RV parks were not incredibly interesting to us for any reasons.
Yeah.
So everything that was on iOverlander and Campendium um,
That's
were
worked
pretty
well
much our
for you.
targets.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you find that you can't find a free spot on iOverlander that will work for you, or your rig or your family, then you're gonna have to start looking at the more mainstream commercial options,
Yeah.
which
Yeah, usually
is
everyone has like, if I can't find this, I'll go to a Cracker Barrel. If I can't find a Cracker Barrel, I'll go to a Walmart, or just so everyone kind of has a level that they eventually get to at the end of the night if they're still driving and
yeah,
need to get off somewhere.
yep. And we stayed at all those places, and they're all, in our experience, absolutely fine.
Yeah.
They can be a little bit bright. They can be bright, and they can be noisy depending on where you are.
Yeah, the
But
noise is that's one of the things, especially, I mean, either trailers or schoolies or van life. I mean, that the sounds are amplified quite a bit from the outside world. So that is one of those things that the more you can do, like you're saying, with, either the right type of insulation, like you guys chose, at least a better choice for sound dampening, and then blackout curtains, things like that to help with the sound is really helpful.
yeah, for us, it's interesting. When it came to the sound, I do think that our rig is probably a bit quieter than a lot. But there's sort of when somebody's like racing a car down the street, there's just no escaping it. And there's some urban areas where, for some reason, from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m., people are racing cars around. Um, but for somehow the noise of voices, like a Walmart parking lot is surprisingly quiet. Um, for voices and vehicles. It's just the road noises nearby that can add up.
Yeah, I definitely seen that as well. How about for you guys, the kind of this year, I kind of always say the chaos of 2020 that it kind of was. How did that affect your guys' life or at all, or change your plans or kind of redirect anything?
Yeah, um, we started out, we started out learning about the pandemic when we were in Queensland, Australia, which
Oh,
is where it's where Tom Hanks and his wife got coronavirus, and they were kind of like the first public figures
yeah.
to get it and talk about it. And so we basically, that was definitely a bit alarming. Having zero information, having no idea what to do, and Nova was sick. All of our cousins that we've been visiting were all sick. It was probably just a sinus thing or a cold, but You know, we're
Yeah.
we're kind of bugging out. We basically had to come back to the states early, and we took what at the time was the last flight to Hawaii from I don't know if it was, I think, yeah, Sydney Airport.
Really? So
So
yeah,
it kind of felt like,
we're in the middle of kind of the panic to get home. A lot of people, were in that kind of situation.
yeah, we were in the middle of the panic to get home, and it was honestly tempting to stay in Australia, um, given given what we know about their health system and sort of the Australian way of trying to protect each other and help each other from situations like this. We felt like we almost wanted to stay there, but we had an unfinished bus. We had these big crazy plans, and so we took that flight to Hawaii and just kind of quarantined during our layover and came home early. And then because we had been traveling, we had already been gone for I've been gone from work for almost a month, and they said you got to stay home for another 2 weeks. Um, so I spent 6 weeks out of work, and it's so funny, in the midst of the panic, so to speak, I lost all ability to do really anything. I could have cranked out YouTube videos, and I didn't have any creative energy. Um, I'm not sure why. It felt strange to do anything or publicly project yourself in any way at that time. But to answer your question, your big question, did it change our plans? We delayed our departure by several weeks, and we left in early June when the numbers were starting to trend down, and
Okay.
they were kind of still trending down until the end of June, and then they started spiking again, and quite badly. And I don't think we really felt the effects of it in the same way because every state was handling it so differently until we got to New Mexico. And New Mexico was so shut down that there were no stores open
Wow.
beyond kind of the mainstream ones.
That's
And
not really that's interesting. I hadn't really heard that. That's not maybe a mainstream narrative that's out there that much, that they're a state that was pretty closed down. I never heard that at all.
yeah, going from Colorado to New Mexico was night and day in a way. And so we kind of got more information about what the world was really like as we were traveling, and it was interesting to have every state be different. Um, we definitely adjusted our plans quite a bit. We had a lot of family and friends to visit, and so we were, making sure we had long gaps of not seeing anybody between those. Um,
Okay.
but I think in large, we did not change anything all that much. Um, your ability to stay socially distanced when you're just living in your own vehicle and shopping in grocery stores and visiting outdoor places was probably a lot easier than it would have been if we had stayed at home. And
Okay.
certainly my job as a firefighter, would have been exposed to much more. I just would have been more exposed. Not that it's a good thing or bad thing. Obviously, it's an important job, and one I kind of missed out on doing, but it's a decision that I made.
Yeah. That was I love that video where you gave the car away. That was amazing. And I thought
Yeah,
that was so good of you, and such a good gesture.
yeah. My parents actually gave me that car when I was 28 years old, um, which was really kind of them. We had just bought a house, and I had been driving a 250cc dual sport dirt bike to work, and my dad gave me that car in a Yankee gift swap, which is a very funny way to give somebody a gift.
Now what is that? I've
So,
never heard of that.
so the okay, I think we also call it white elephant Christmas. There's several names for it. We call
Oh,
it Yankee
okay. Yeah.
gift swap. Yeah, so you bring a present to the table, and this was just between my my nuclear family, my parents and myself and my siblings. Uh, but my dad had an Altoid canister with the Honda car key in it, and it was a 2003 Honda Odyssey minivan, and he sort of like nudged me in that direction to take the minivan because he
Okay.
knew I was pretty much trying to renovate a house from a dual sport motorcycle.
Oh,
So
that's
you
funny.
know,
Good story.
yeah, and really the feeling that I was having was, my parents really invested so much in me, and um, the reason that I've been able to do any of this is because they've given me so much confidence, security, the ability to believe in myself, and I just wanted to pass some of that on to Nate, who really helped me out in a tough time, and of course he's family. And I've actually heard from Nate. Nate works at a Papa John's now, and he has already saved $1,000 in a savings account. Um, and I think he's 15 now. So just unbelievable for him to like get his first job, save $1,000
Yeah.
in 6 months, and I think that hopefully it wasn't even really the car that I was trying to give him so much as the thank you and the I believe in you, and you should believe in yourself message. And I think if you give somebody a big thing like that, they're like, wow, he really trusts me. He really believes in me. And that's how I feel about him, and that's how I wanted him to feel. It was a sweet moment for me too.
Yeah, that was really awesome. It was really great to, that you were able to share that with, with everybody as well. Cause, like people say, like one kind act, can spark another. So when, I do believe when people see that, it does spark that in other people, as well. With building the bus, did you have much construction experience, any construction experience, or were you going in blind?
I was definitely not going in blind. I have I've basically renovated. I've done cosmetic renovations of maybe 3 apartments, 4 apartments before that. So I had done your basic things like painting, refinishing floors, uh, finish plumbing, finish electrical work. None of the raw stuff, no raw carpentry that
Okay.
I'd put IKEA cabinets together for. It was literally just enough to make me crazy enough to take on the bus, with the belief that I could do it, and enough to just give me some confidence. But I will say that 95% of what I learned from the bus, or by the end of the bus build, came from the bus. The work that I'd done previously hadn't really hadn't helped me tackle those issues besides the confidence. So I had a bit of experience.
Yeah, I mean, maybe knowing enough to know that you can learn, if
Yeah.
you need to. And YouTube, I mean, that's, a part of the reason why I'm doing this, because it's been such a great resource for me. And, in the studio that I'm sitting in, that it's because of other, YouTube channels that for that had sparked like, hey, you know what, they're doing that. We can do that too. Let's try. And, in a matter of 5 months, we built this here. And so it's like to see, that people are sparking that. And so that's amazing that you're, out there doing that.
Yeah,
um
my goal with the YouTube videos, I saw other people doing it, and I was like, we all desperately need some help. So I was like, let me try and make how-to videos. And I don't know if I should say how-to videos, but my intent was to kind of help others figure out how to do their own builds too. But I really quickly realized that I was not at all qualified to share any advice. And
yeah.
I sort of was like, wow, I'm kind of just winging it here sometimes. I really need to make that clear to people. And I need to kind of sort of pivot from like a advice and help, and more into just inspiration. And then when I started to take that mindset, I started to just get really excited about the videos I was making, because at the time I was really, you know, I had so much going on. I had, as a full-time firefighter, I I've got some real estate investments that I managed from before. Um, Valerie she got me for my birthday present right after Nova was born, real estate licensing classes. So I became a real estate agent during that time too. I started the YouTube channel. We had just had a baby. I was so just like in over my head, and I realized I was at a point where um, I was living a crazy life, and I was just thinking if I can just show that I can get through this somehow. Although I wasn't really able to bring all of that personal stuff into the videos, but even just the bus build alone is it's such a huge challenge, and I just wanted other people to see, if I can do it, then you can do it.
Yeah,
And
that might be the biggest spark I think for people out of everything and every tutorial and how to. And there's a million of them out there, and anytime you run into a problem, you can usually hopefully most of the time find some specific tool. But just to see people's story, the stories, humans, we're inspired by stories, and what other
yeah,
people do is what really gives us, I think, hope, and gives us the encouragement that we can, that we can do it too. So yeah, that's really is what you see. And I love you do a lot of things on your channel that I really love. One is the you with solar. I think that is one of the scariest for most people out there, that the solar part of it is scary. You're cutting into the roof, there's usually holes, there's a lot, there's a lot that's just unknown and new to people. So I do love that you actively talk about that. You're actively out there giving advice and trying to help people with their setups. You want to talk a little bit about your setup and how it's worked for you, and anything.
sure. Um, I was just as perplexed as anybody else when I started the solar system and the solar planning. I will say that it's kind of like a thousand-piece puzzle. You look at it and you're like, how in the world am I going to put this together? But you find the corner pieces and you start to put together the edges, and then you start putting together some element of it, and you realize, with these baby steps, that you're starting to understand what the big picture is. So that really is what happened to me. And eventually, you have to make. I think the hardest thing is to make decisions like, what charge controller do I want? What batteries do I need? And what even is a charge controller? And the more you kind of like make a decision, like, okay, for us, we wanted as much solar power as possible. So we're going to use the whole roof to, make as much power as we can. So we were like, okay, well, we can fit 8 400-watt panels if we can find them, and that's 3,200 watts. And now we have to, you know, pick a charge controller that's right for that. And you kind of make decisions, and then you have to adapt to the decisions. And that's how you end up with your final system. At least it was for us. Now, in the midst of the build and being so, just as perplexed as anybody else by solar systems, I went and got some advice from somebody else. I went to a bus builder named Charlie Kearns, who's got a website. Look at that bus. I'm sorry, chromeyellowcorp.com, and look at that bus on Instagram. And he was kind of like a role model. He's a professional bus builder. I said, hey, Charlie, can you just, design a bit of a system for me? And I'll pay you to, actually paid him to put it together and ship it to me. But when I got it, I realized that it was actually very simple, and I was able to kind of figure out and understand everything that was on it. But in that really tough moment where you have no idea what to do, I think it's definitely advisable to go get a little bit of expert help,
Yeah.
and just to push you through that, that moment, because while you're trying to figure out insulate solar power, you're trying to figure out plumbing and insulation and HVAC and water storage all at the same time. So that's something that I did to kind of get me through. But I actually took apart everything that he sent me and put it back together in a way that worked better for my space. And it's not really an incredibly challenging concept once you start to understand it. Everybody can figure it out. I would just go for the basic, simple plug and play options, and I would reach out to someone for help And then to answer your question about our system, we have 2,430 watts of solar, which is definitely a lot. Um, it's enough. More is also better.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Never get enough
And then,
energy.
yep. And then we have a 315 amp hour at 24-volt battery bank. So we've got 600 amp hour batteries and, solar charge controller, inverter. We've got a 2,400 watt inverter that can peak and surge higher than that. And after that, it's DC distribution and AC distribution. And AC distribution is really just the same as it is in a house, and DC is the same as it is in a car or a boat. Without getting too technical. And then the really cool thing about what we did, the thing that I'm really excited about, is that we actually went all electric for everything besides heat. So we cook with electricity, we heat water with electricity, and do everything literally except for heat. And to me, it's really exciting and fun because that means we don't have to store propane, we don't have to buy it, we don't have to worry about it, and we can just run off of diesel and solar power.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think that's technology that only would really be well available in the last few years that people can really start transitioning from maybe not having to use propane at all. So that's interesting.
I think you definitely need lithium to do that,
Yeah.
and you definitely need to prioritize solar on your roof over storage on your roof. Even if it's a van, you can fit enough solar power on the roof of a van to go all electric, but you might not have a rooftop deck or
Yeah.
storage up there.
Yeah, you gotta figure, you gotta sometimes sacrifice, in areas for needs and power while you're moving is on top of the list.
Yeah, and with the vans too, having a reasonable lithium bank, if you're driving a lot and you go for the alternator charging, um, you can do a lot. I mean, I really think that I think you're right that all electric is kind of within the past 5 or 10 years at a max, but I honestly think it's the smart way to go moving forward. Unless you have to do a lot of heating, our goal is to always chase nice weather. Um, so heat is something that's almost a bit of an afterthought. It's like we always need to have heat, but we're not going to have to run it. So at some points, propane makes more sense for some people, 100%.
Yeah, true. Yeah, each scenario, each living environment, even depending on where you are in the country, definitely can make a big difference on those choices for heating options. What are some of the biggest maybe learning lessons you've learned along the way? I mean, you've spent 2 years um, building and just any lessons that maybe people could take with them. One thing that I'll bring up that you were saying that I really thought was interesting was you were talking about when is the right time to get out. For people, I mean that I like when they had bought a bus and maybe they had gutted it, and just you know seeing where like I thought that was a good piece of advice to say, don't start construction without, until you really know this is we're committed to this. So I thought
Mm,
you had given a lot of really honest advice that is very, very, really practical for people that might be on the fence about certain decisions.
yeah, I so it's really hard to say what anybody should do um, at any given time because every person's situation is so different. And I will say that I think that given my background, my situation is probably more privileged than a lot. I had a home already. I had a stable job. I had a stable job that actually gave me free time as well. And um, we had planned for this. We had saved for this. We were able to use that. We basically just banked that Airbnb money, and we were able to make it work for us moving forward. I will say that I think that no matter what, you're going to be stepping way out of your comfort zone, and once you've stepped way out of your comfort zone, and let's just say that the peak of being out of your comfort zone is when you're you have no money, your build is halfway done, you have no idea how you're going to finish it and how you're going to do it. That's obviously that's both not the moment to quit, and it's not the moment to hit the road. Um, it's a time when you need to do whatever it takes to get yourself from being that far out of your comfort zone, and eventually you're going to be kind of like, hopefully your trajectory is getting back to, or just getting more comfortable with where you are and what you're doing. And let's just say that peak comfort was before you started the bus build or whatever build you're working on, and peak discomfort is when you're in the middle and stuck and scared. You need to slowly bring yourself back to that point, a point somewhere between those two, and then finish your bus and go. If that's your plan, if that's what you think is right for you, you're never going to be doing this in your comfort zone. Um, now, for us that meant living in the bus in the side yard and Airbnb our house so that we could get some money, get a bit of a cushion, and get comfortable in the bus before leaving. I think that for everybody, it's just going to be super different.
Yeah, a little different. It's nice though. The more stories you hear from people, the more though a little bit of maybe templates people can get along the way. Things that hey, this has worked for other people. Maybe even something like that. People that maybe are in a position to be able to get something, renovate, and live in it, and either rent out a dwelling that they own or things like that. There's lots of little tips and tricks out there that I'm sure people have seen work along the way to kind of give a place for people to pass that advice out.
Yeah, and in that vein, there's something that I want to tell you about, that's always on my mind in some way. Everything I do, especially if it's a risk, has a contingency plan in place for it, and it might have multiple contingency plans. So, spending 50 grand on that bus obviously is a huge risk. So, what happens if that's a bad idea, if that all goes wrong? So our contingency plan was, well, we're going to rent it out and make some of that money back. And that's contingency plan number one. Contingency plan number two was um, was kind of like, we're going to make YouTube videos and take photos and write Instagram captions and create some content, because that is something that um, that's something that could be a moneymaker for us at some point, or it could be something that we could just learn from. So that's sort of how we went down the YouTube venture. It was like, let's create some intellectual property, is honestly what I think it is, because that's something that you can use to leverage a living out of, if you get lucky, or if you work long enough at it. So everything I do has a contingency plan, or multiple angles and exit strategies. And I think people should think about that a little bit more. Uh, even when we bought our first house, the the contingency plan was, well, we can't quite afford this house, even though it was very modest and inexpensive at the time. We weren't making much money. We're going to try and rent out this spare space on Airbnb to make up for it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. What do you guys have any future destinations or projects that you guys have planned for the channel? One of the things I love that you guys are doing right now has been some of these tours that you guys, as you guys have been on your travels, getting to kind of meet and interview, some other people and couples that are doing awesome stuff and that have unique stories.
Yeah, so that's something that I'm very inspired by. I'm definitely extremely excited about that too. That's something that we're going to be doing going forward. We're going to be doing more of the mobile dwellings tours. Um, we are basically working on a rebrand at the moment. Um, we're rebranding to mobile dwellings,
Okay.
and the reason for that is because our current name, Gilligan Phantom, is the bus's name, and I'd like the channel to become about more than building and traveling in that bus.
Yeah.
And I think that name aligns better with the tours. And so um, I've been making new videos that haven't been released, that I haven't even had time to start working on. But there's sort of a new ethos behind it, and we are actually so the tours were a lot of fun, and definitely the the mobile dwellings is in line with the tours. But we actually just stopped in Florida to start building another bus for some very close friends of ours. And there's a lot of contingency plans built into that bus build. And it's not something that I'm likely to do again, but it was just so many stars were aligning in various ways
Okay.
at the right time with the right people. So we're actually doing another build right now. Um, I won't be ready to release videos about it for quite a while, but if you go on our Instagram, Gilligan Phantom, you'll see current photos from that bus build.
Okay.
And I'm very passionate about the idea of mobile dwellings, and having built one, having lived in one, getting to tour other people's and building one again. Um, I'm just like waking up every day excited about sharing that with other people
Yeah.
and that idea as well. So that's what we have going on right now. Our plans are not super concrete, and we also are having another baby, and that's going to um, sort of put a pause on all of this for a while. So if you're on Instagram, you'll see kind of exactly what's going on with us, but YouTube's going to take me a long time to actually get the content out.
No, I totally understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Instagram right now is a really great place for people to find you guys and see what you're up to as well. Any other of your socials? Do you guys Facebook? I mean, obviously your YouTube channel.
Yeah, we basically just do Instagram and YouTube, and perhaps TikTok as well. Although I've been neglecting that. Yeah, those three is are pretty much all we can figure out how to manage. So
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh,
with the
yeah.
spots.
Figuring out that time is always the hard part.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for joining me today. I've had such a great time, and thank you again for everything you're doing. Keep putting out good work and just inspiring people to keep trying new things, stepping out beyond their comfort zone. So thank you again. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Joshua. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast.